Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Southern Horrors and Other Writings by Ida B. Wells. Before we get in, as always, I have in the description box below the videos my Patreon and Coffee if you want to donate. Coffee if you want one time. Patreon if you want a continuous donation per month. I appreciate it. Don't put yourself out. I'm not asking for that, but if you want to go ahead and donate, by all means, please go ahead. But anyway, today we'll be picking up with the chapter we kind of left off with in the last episode. Since it's been so long, let's go ahead and hop into this. Delivered to the mob by the governor of the state. John Peterson, near Denmark, South Carolina, was suspected of rape, but escaped, went to Columbia, and placed himself under Governor Tillman's protection, declaring he too could prove an alibi by white witnesses. A white reporter, hearing his declaration, volunteered to find these witnesses and telegraphed the governor that he would be in Columbia with them on Monday. In the meantime, the mob at Denmark, learning Peterson's whereabouts, went to the governor and demanded the prisoner. Governor Tillman, who had, during his canvass for re-election the year before, declared that he would lead a mob to lynch a Negro that assaulted a white woman, gave Peterson up to the mob. He was taken back to Denmark, and the white girl in the case as positively declared that he was not the man. But the verdict of the mob was that the crime had been committed and somebody had to hang for it. And if he, Peterson, was not guilty of that, he was of some other crime, and he was hung and body riddled with 1,000 bullets. Lynched as a warning. Alabama furnishes a case in point. The colored man named Daniel Edwards lived near Selma, Alabama, and worked for a family of a farmer near that place. This resulted in an intimacy between the young man and a daughter of the householder, which finally developed into the disgrace of the girl. After the birth of the child, the mother disclosed the fact that Edwards was its father. The relationship had been sustained for more than a year, and yet this colored man was apprehended, thrown into jail, from whence he was taken by a mob of 100 neighbors and hung to a tree, and his body riddled with bullets. A dispatch which describes the lynching ends as follows. Upon his back was found pinned this morning the following: warning to all Negroes that are too intimate with white girls. This is the work of 100 best citizens of the South Side. There can be no doubt from the announcement made by this 100 best citizens that they understand full well the character of the relationship which existed between Edwards and the girl. But when the dispatches were sent out describing the affair, it was claimed that Edwards was lynched for rape, suppressing the truth. In a county in Mississippi during the month of July, the Associated Press dispatches sent out a report that the sheriff's 8-year-old daughter had been assaulted by a big black burly brute who had been promptly lynched. The facts, which have since been investigated, show the girl was more than 18-year-old and that she was discovered by her father in the young man's room, who was a servant on the place. But these facts the Associated Press has not given to the world, nor did the same agency acquaint the world with the fact that a Negro youth who was lynched in Tuscumbia, Alabama, the same year on the same charge, told the white girl who accused him before the mob that he had met her in the woods, often by appointment. There is a young mulatto in one of the state prisons of the South today who is there by charge of a young white woman to screen herself. He is a college graduate and has been corresponding with and clandestinely visiting her until he was surprised and run out of a room in Deshabille by her father. He was put in prison in another town to save his life from the mob, and his lawyer advised that it were better to save his life by pleading guilty to charges made up or being made and being sentenced for years than to attempt a defense by exhibiting the letters written him by this girl. In the latter event, the mob would surely murder him, while there was a chance for his life by adopting the former course. Names, places, and dates were not given for the same reason. The excuse has come to be so safe, it is not surprising that a Philadelphia girl, beautiful and well educated and of good family, should make a confession published in all the daily papers of that city October 1894 that she had been stealing for some time, and that to cover one of her thefts she had said that she had been bound and gagged in her father's house by a colored man and the money stolen therefrom by him. Had this been done in many localities, it would have been necessary for her to identify the first Negro in that vicinity to have brought about another lynching. B. A vile slander with scant retraction. The following, published by the Cleveland, Ohio Leader of October 23, 1894, only emphasizes our demand that a fair trial shall be given those accused of crime and the protection of the law be extended until time for a defense be granted. The sensational story sent out last night from Hicksville that the Negro had outraged a little 4-year-old girl proves to be a base canard. The correspondents who went into the details should have taken the pains to investigate, and the officials should have known more of the matter before they gave out such grossly exaggerated information. The Negro, Charles O'Neill, had been working for a couple of women and, it seems, had worked all winter without being remunerated. There is a little girl, and the girl's mother and grandmother evidently started the story with idea of frightening the Negro out of the country and thus balancing accounts. The town was considerably wrought up, and for a time things looked serious. The accused had a preliminary hearing today, and not an iota of evidence was produced to indicate that such a crime had been committed or that he had even attempted such an outrage. The village marshal was frightened nearly out of his wits and did little to quiet the excitement last night. The affair was an outrage on the Negro at the expense of innocent childhood, a brainless fabrication from start to finish. The original story was sent throughout this country and England, but the Cleveland Leader, so far as known, is the only journal which has published these facts in refutation of the slander so often published against the race. Not only is it true that many of the alleged cases of rape against the Negro are like the foregoing, but the same crime committed by white men against Negro women and girls is never punished by mob or the law. A leading journal in South Carolina openly said some months ago that it is not the same thing for a white man to assault a colored woman as for a colored man to assault a white woman, because the colored woman had no finer feelings nor virtue to be outraged. Yet colored women have always had far more reason to complain of white men in this respect than ever white women have had of Negroes. Illinois has a lynching. In the month of June 1893, the proud Commonwealth of Illinois joined the ranks of lynching states. Illinois, which gave the world the immortal heroes Lincoln, Grant, and Logan, trailed its banner of justice in the dust, dyed its hands red in the blood of a man not proven guilty of crime. June the 3rd, 1893, the country about Decatur, one of the largest cities of the state, was startled with the cry that a white woman had been assaulted by a colored tramp. 3 days later, a colored man named Samuel Bush was arrested and put in jail. A white man testified that Bush, on the day of the assault, asked him where he could get a drink, and he pointed to the house where the farmer's wife was subsequently said to have been assaulted. Bush said he went to the well but did not go near the house and did not assault the woman. After he was arrested, the alleged victim did not see him to identify him. He was presumed to be guilty. The citizens determined to kill him. The mob gathered, went to the jail, met with no resistance, took the suspected man, dragged him out, tearing every stitch of clothing from his body, then hanged him to a telegraph pole. The grand jury refused to indict the lynchers, though the names of over 20 persons who were leaders in the mob were well known. In fact, 22 persons were indicted, but the grand jurors and the prosecuting attorney disagreed as to the form of the indictments, which caused the jurors to change their minds. All indictments were reconsidered and the matter was dropped. Not one of the dozens of men prominent in that murder have suffered a whit more inconvenience for the butchery of that man than they would have suffered for shooting a dog. Color line justice. In Baltimore, Maryland, A gang of white ruffians assaulted a respectable colored girl who was out walking with a young woman or young man of her own race. They held her escort and outraged the girl. It was a deed dastardly enough to arouse Southern blood, which gives its horror of rape as excuse for lawlessness, but she was a colored woman. The case went to the courts, and there they were acquitted. In Nashville, Tennessee, there was a white man, Pat Hannafin, who outraged a little girl, and from physical injuries received, she was ruined for life. He was jailed for 6 months, discharged, and is now a detective in that city. In the same city, last May, a white man outraged a colored girl in a drugstore. He was arrested and released on bail at the trial. It was rumored that 500 colored men had organized to lynch him. 250 white citizens armed themselves with Winchesters and guarded him. A cannon was placed in front of his home, and the Buchanan Rifles, state militia, ordered to the scene for his protection. The colored mob did not show up. Only 2 weeks before, Ephraim Grizzard, who had only been charged with rape upon a white woman, had been taken from the jail with Governor Buchanan and the police and militia standing by, dragged through the streets in broad daylight, knives plunged into him at every step, and with fiendish cruelty that a frenzied mob could devise, he was at last swung out on the bridge with hands cut to pieces as he tried to climb up the stanchions. A naked, bloody example of the bloodthirstiness of the 19th century civilization of the Athens of the South. No cannon nor military were called out in his defense. He dared to visit a white woman. At the very moment when these civilized whites were announcing their determination to protect their wives and daughters by murdering Grizzard, a white man was in the same jail for raping 8-year-old Maggie Reese, a colored girl. He was not harmed. The honor of the grown women who were glad enough to be supported by the Grizzard boys and Ed Coy, as long as the liaison was not known, needed protection. They were white. The outrage upon helpless childhood needed no avenging in this case. She was black. A white man in Guthrie, Oklahoma Territory, 2 months after inflicted such injuries upon another colored girl that she died. He was not punished, but an attempt was made in the same town in the month of June to lynch a colored man who visited a white woman. In Memphis, Tennessee, in the month of June, Ellerton L. Dorr, who is the husband of Russell Hancock's widow, was arrested for attempted rape on Maddie Coe, a neighbor's cook. He was only prevented from accomplishing this purpose by the appearance of Maddie's employer. Dorr's friends say he was drunk and not responsible for his actions. The grand jury refused to indict him and he was discharged. In Tallahassee, Florida, a colored girl, Charlotte Gillum, was assaulted by white men. Her father went to have a warrant for their arrest issued, but the judge refused to issue it. In Bowling Green, Virginia, Moses Christopher, a colored lad, was charged with assault on September the 10th. He was indicted, tried, convicted, and sentenced to death in one day. In that same state, at Danville, 2 weeks before, on August the 29th, Thomas J. Penn, a white man, committed a criminal assault upon Lena Hanna, a 12-year-old colored girl, but he has not been tried. Certainly not killed either by the law or by mob. In Surry County, Virginia, C.L. Brock, a white man, criminally assaulted a 10-year-old colored girl and threatened to kill her if she told. Notwithstanding, she confessed to her aunt, Miss Alice Bates, and the white brute added further crime by killing Mrs. Bates when she upbraided him about the crime upon her niece. He emptied the contents of his revolver into her body as she lay. Brock has never been apprehended, and no effort has been made to do so by the legal authorities. But even when punishment is meted out by the law to white villains for this horrible crime, it is seldom or never that capital punishment is invoked. 2 cases just clipped from the daily papers will suffice to show how this crime is punished when committed by white offenders and black. Louisville, Kentucky, October the 19th. Smith Young, colored, as today sentenced to be hanged. Young criminally assaulted a 6-year-old child about 6 months ago. Jacques Blucher, a Pontiac Frenchman who was arrested at the place for a criminal assault on his daughter Fanny on July the 29th last, pleaded nolo contendere when placed on trial at East Greenwich near Providence, Rhode Island on Tuesday, and was sentenced to 5 years in state prison. Charles Wilson was convicted of assault upon 7-year-old Mamie Keys in Philadelphia in October and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was white. Indianapolis court sentenced a white man in September to 8 years in prison for assault upon a 12-year-old white girl. April the 24th, 1893, a lynching was set for Denmark, South Carolina on the charge of rape. A white girl accused a Negro of assault and the mob was about to lynch him. A few hours before the lynching, 3 reputable white men rode into the town and solemnly testified that the accused Negro was at work with them 25 miles away on the day and at the hour the crime had been committed. He was accordingly set free. A white person's word is taken as absolutely for as against a Negro. But yeah, that ends the chapter, or the part of the chapter of the textbook, I should say. But yeah, still got a little bit left for the actual pamphlet we're reading in. But yeah. Anyway, there was a couple of notes at the bottom. Let's go over them here. They talked about kicking the man out of the house in a certain state, in deshabille, which the notes say just means undressed. So yeah. And then they talk about Illinois being the home of immortal heroes Lincoln, Grant, and Logan. And of course, Lincoln, president of the 16th president of the United States, Grant, general in charge of the Union that ended the Civil War, when the Civil War ended, and would become a president himself a little later. 18th, I think. But then they mention Logan. And it says John Alexander Logan, 1826 to 1886, a Union general in the Civil War who went on to serve in both houses of Congress, House of Representatives, the Senate, and as a radical Republican congressman, was active in the impeachment trial of President Andrew Johnson. So yeah. But those are some footnotes they had in the piece there. Beforehand, nothing for the chapter. But yeah. A lot discussed with how rape was often treated. We know, as is described there, white men were to rape a colored woman or even a colored child, you saw little to no sentence. I think the one man got a 5-year term. But a man of color is accused of raping a white woman. Yeah. You saw a lot of the times it ended in a lynching, mobs taking the accused out of the jail cell and inflicting their own form of personal justice, regardless of if the guy was guilty or not. They didn't care. They were just animals, racist, stupid. I mean, put any derogatory adjective there and it kind of matches who they are. But, yeah. Then, one I find interesting, the guy rapes this young colored girl. The colored girl finally comes home, tells her aunt. The aunt goes to tell the man off, and he just empties his revolver in her, even after she's on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. And he gets charged with nothing. Nothing. It shows the inequality of society and how it was between people of color and white people were treated. And like I said, this is the 1890s. Slavery just ended 30 some years ago, a little over 30 years. You wonder, how can anybody do that kind of stuff? How can people look back and say, it was just her? I mean, back then I can kind of understand there's a different ideation. They saw things completely differently. It's not an excuse, but you can understand why these things happened. And yet, there are people nowadays, and they should know better, but they're still like, I think that was the good thing to do. No. You're stupid. You're really just stupid, is all you are. Yeah. Anyway, we'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. And it can't just be trash sources like a blog post or some unproven BS from some tinfoil hat wearing quack. But thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.